Final ending to Wanted to Be Bad, Part 1 down below. Good morning, honey, I greeted her brightly. Stanley, where the heck is my bracelet? She yelled. What about the dinner reservation and, for heaven's sake, my flowers? Linda, are you okay? I asked, bewildered. What are you talking about? I heard you went to the jeweler and bought me a bracelet for Valentine's Day and made reservations at my favorite restaurant, she explained. But all I got was that simple homemade card. I feigned disappointment, gazing up at her. At least I tried with the card, Linda, I remarked. What did you offer in return? I offered what you seem to always desire, she responded. Really? I queried. So, you're saying I should spend nearly $3,000 on a brand new, diamond-studded bracelet, fork out another $200 for a personalized message on it, drop at least $300 for a meal at that overrated French place I dislike, and still shell out a bit for fresh flowers. I'm out here, getting you all these new and nice things, and you offer me something that's, frankly, not on the same level. How is that balanced? She was speechless, her mouth agape. But she found no words. Linda, I've grown to understand that life's about more than physical intimacy. It's certainly about more than waiting around for intimacy from someone who doesn't share the same enthusiasm, or uses it as leverage rather than a form of expressing our feelings. She tried to speak, but no words came. So, don't fret, I went on. Since that aspect of our relationship is no longer a priority, it doesn't hold any sway over me. So why should I go to such lengths for you? Mentioning the cost of the bracelet she desired likely made her think I had purchased it. She would probably turn the house upside down looking for it, but to no avail, as it wasn't there. I brushed past her and left for my run. Upon returning, I made arrangements for Dahlia with a friend in need of an assistant. It wasn't much, but she appreciated the chance. Linda and I then entered a chilly period. I discreetly followed her a few times, capturing her actions on my phone. Finding her compromisingly involved with someone else on multiple occasions confirmed my suspicions about our marriage's end. However, I realized I needed more concrete evidence for my case. By the time I had gathered enough evidence, I was ready to leave. I had transferred all my funds, secured a new condo nearby, and made it feel like home. Dahlia, who I'd invited over, shared her enjoyment of her new job and revealed her previous one. It turned out, my young and attractive Dahlia, who had enticed so many through her voice, had yet to experience intimacy herself. That revelation led to quite the enlightening conversation. That evening, Linda rose to deal with the evening's chore of taking out the trash. As she clutched the bag and announced, I'm off to dump the trash, I offered a playful goodbye. Really, Stanley, she retorted. It's not like you're bothered. Linda, need a hand with that. I offered. I've got it, Stanley, she insisted. All right, I chuckled. That was my last encounter with Linda for a substantial period. By the time Linda returned to our condo that night, I had vanished. However, I left behind a few items in spots where I knew she'd stumble upon them. Among these was a bag from the jewelry store hidden in the linen closet, with the receipt for a bracelet still inside. Linda attempted to reach out that night and in the following days, but I ignored her calls and messages. I spoke to our daughter when she called, yet I refrained from discussing her mother or our issues. Reflecting on it, I view that decision as a misstep. The situation deteriorated, and our daughter felt compelled to choose sides, aligning with her mother. This pained me deeply, given our previously strong bond. Weeks later, with the condo's equity loan payment looming, Linda was in for a shock. She discovered I had left her barely anything in the bank, just $24, symbolizing each good year of our marriage, a gesture lost in its subtlety. Desperate, Linda sought financial help from friends, even approaching Dino, only to learn he had been terminated from his job. My legal actions against the condo's managing company, over employee conduct, had resulted in a settlement for me and Dino's dismissal. When Linda sought Dino for help, she found he wasn't home. Dino was recuperating from a severe assault by local youths, an incident Linda was unaware of. Amid her financial scramble, Linda faced eviction. She tried to argue with the finance company that the loan was under my name, but she had unknowingly assumed responsibility for it. A lawyer informed her of the grim reality and advised her to seek a divorce to possibly claim some of our shared assets. He arranged a meeting with Ollie and brought forward documents outlining their proposed division of assets. Linda had hoped I would attend, aiming for a chance to converse. Ollie disclosed to them that I was at a wellness center, focusing on managing stress through a week-long program, an initiative Ollie had facilitated himself. Ollie unveiled the financial turmoil I had navigated, marked by reckless spending and poor investment choices, documented thoroughly. This financial misadventure, costing me a significant sum in settling demands from various establishments, was a calculated move. He articulated to Linda the wisdom in her decision to separate, to shield herself from potential financial claims due to our marital ties. The discussion turned to my retirement savings, countered by Ollie with documentation of Linda's disassociation from these benefits. Realizing the gravity of her situation, Linda agreed to an uncontested divorce, sparing herself from the burden of my financial missteps. Within 3 months, my path to independence was clear. Linda sought refuge with my daughter and her family, marking a rift between my daughter and me. Amber was under the impression that my actions were solely driven by irresponsibility, leaving her mother in a dire state without cause. Linda's life took a turn, often found reminiscing over our shared memories through old photographs at Amber's. Her life continued on a different trajectory, visibly changed by the events, yet never fully confronting her part in our shared history. On my end, life unfolded in new and fulfilling directions. Without the dramatic confrontations typical of divorce tales, I engaged in community and travel groups, especially one that catered to middle-aged singles with a passion for travel, offering a sense of camaraderie and adventure. My routine included regular runs and fitness activities, with achievements in local races and aspirations for longer distances. My running schedule balanced intensity with recovery, incorporating variety to maintain engagement and physical health. My evenings varied from leisurely relaxation at home to exploratory drives, with the occasional help of a cleaner who not only maintained my living space but also shared meals, adding a personal touch to my domestic life. She was a younger woman in her mid-30s, quite appealing in her own right. We'd exchanged those hesitant glances a few times, hinting at the possibility of a connection, whether fleeting or something more substantial. Yet, I never made a move. In my mind, initiating a relationship without genuine affection, merely to fend off loneliness, would render my decision to leave Linda pointless. After all, there's a stark contrast between feeling lonely and being alone. I was alone, by choice, surrounded by enough people to keep loneliness at bay. However, it seemed as though the world couldn't grasp the idea of choosing solitude, viewing it as abnormal or simply misguided. It felt like everyone I encountered was eager to set me up with someone. Over time, Dahlia had grown to be a close confidante and staunch ally. She was the one who helped me navigate the fallout when my daughter cut ties with me. Amber was under the mistaken belief that I had abandoned her mother without cause, assuming I had spiraled into vices I hadn't indulged in. Dahlia and I met for lunch a few times a week and often enjoyed dinners together. We shared movie nights and other activities, preferring the company to solitude. Our friendship was purely platonic. Despite Dahlia's youth and beauty, our significant age difference precluded a romantic relationship. She filled the void left by my estranged daughter, and I became the paternal figure absent in her life. One evening, as we dined, Dahlia broached a sensitive topic. "Stanley, do you ever feel lonely?" she inquired. "Never," I replied confidently. "My life is too rich for loneliness. Besides, I have the pleasure of company from a remarkable young woman for outings." "Is she beautiful?" Dahlia prodded. "Beautiful is an understatement," I responded. "She stands out as one of the most radiant young women around, more a daughter to me than my own ever was." Her smile brightened the room. "Stanley, do you trust her?" she continued. "Absolutely," I assured her. "That's wonderful because she's been giving it some thought and believes she might know the right person for you." "Sweetheart, let's not go there," I started. "I'm just not in the place for that right now. I've just left a 30-year relationship that, by the end, was more a burden than a joy. I had to break free to save my own dignity. I just need some time to enjoy being me. Is that all right?" "When you feel ready, just let me know," she replied with understanding. A few days after our conversation, something unexpected happened. I was jogging in the park on a leisurely paced day under a clear sky. This park had become a familiar refuge since my separation from Linda. Over the months, it had grown to be a part of my routine, a place where I knew every sheltering tree, and the best spots for a sprint when I didn't feel like heading to the track. Then, there she was, seeming as much a part of the park as the paths themselves. She had an ageless grace about her, carrying herself in a way that seemed to defy the years. Many older women who keep a slender figure tend to look frail, as though the slightest breeze could topple them. But not her. She could be anywhere from her 40s to her 60s, yet she radiated vitality. Her smile was infectious, her figure remarkable. Her legs were sleek, her posture confident, and her overall physique was just harmonious. She had a vibrancy that many lose with age, her form fitting perfectly to her spirit. Her face, heart-shaped and somehow familiar, captured my attention each lap around the park. Her routine was as varied as she was, indulging in whatever activity brought her joy at the moment. While I maintained my steady jog, she moved from running, to pausing among the flowers, to power walking, each action seeming to be an expression of her freedom. The moment that truly caught me off guard was when she smiled directly at me. Despite being 54, I felt a youthful bewilderment I hadn't experienced in decades. That smile caused me to lose all sense of time and direction, leading me straight into a tree. The surrounding laughter barely registered as I picked myself up, only to see her covering a laugh with her hand, eyes sparkling with amusement. That image, that moment of joy and surprise, has stayed with me, marking a turning point in my life. She was an enigma. Everything about her defied simple explanation. Her hair, neither notably short nor long, danced with a vivacity all its own, hanging just above her shoulders in what seemed like a whimsically extended pageboy cut. The color was a striking silvery white, not gray, but pure and shimmering. I couldn't fathom why she hadn't succumbed to the societal norm of dyeing it. Linda, for instance, had waged war against every silver strand from the moment they dared appear. This woman, however, seemed to wear her natural hue as a badge of honor, as if challenging the world to see her beauty without the camouflage of artificial color. She could have easily been mistaken for someone much younger if she'd chosen to dye her hair, yet there she was, gracefully embracing her years. Her skin was flawless, without a wrinkle to betray her age, and her physique defied easy classification. Her approach to exercise was as unorthodox as it was effective, eschewing traditional routines for a variety of activities that seemed to nourish her spirit as much as her body. She found joy in the simplest things, whether sitting among flowers or playing with children, always lighting up the world with her radiant smiles. I found myself running extra laps, hoping for another chance encounter, another smile. Yet, by the time I circled back, she had vanished. Later, over lunch with Dahlia, I couldn't help but express my fascination. "You seem unusually cheerful," she observed. "I encountered the most captivating woman in the park today," I admitted, hastily adding, "Besides you, of course." Dahlia's response was frosty. "I highly doubt that," she retorted, her tone turning cold. "But, Dahlia, it wasn't like that. I didn't even speak to her. She was just different. I probably won't even see her again," I explained, trying to soften the blow. "So, a random woman in the park has suddenly caught your fancy?" Dahlia accused, clearly upset. "Listen," I attempted to diffuse the tension. "Don't listen to me, Stanley," she cut me off, her mood darkening further. "I had plans for us." "What do you mean?" I asked, bewildered by the turn of the conversation. "Stanley, I cherish you," she expressed, sending my heart racing. "I yearn for you to be a part of my life, find stability with someone who appreciates you as you truly deserve." This felt like a surreal dream. Dahlia was captivating, yet her youth placed her worlds apart from me. My life wasn't meant to mirror those tales where an older gentleman finds solace in the arms of a much younger woman, leading to a blissful union predicated on kindness alone. Few people ever ponder what binds such couples together beyond their affection. I adore my car, yet I'm not about to exchange vows with it. What subjects do such disparate pairs discuss? The man, perhaps in his 50s, reminiscing about the prime days of Van Halen, while the woman, in her 20s, regards Britney Spears as a relic of the past, oblivious to Madonna's true origins. What shared experiences could they possibly have? And what about the years ahead, when age takes its toll on him while she remains vibrant and lively? Then comes the sequel in the saga of divorce, echoing a familiar refrain, moving on from a failed relationship only to find history repeating itself. It's a path I'd rather not tread. "Dahlia, dear," I gently started, "my affection for you is deep, but it's akin to what one would feel for a daughter. The age gap between us is too vast." Dahlia's reaction was unexpected. Her initial disappointment quickly gave way to laughter, a laughter that lasted several minutes before she faced me again, tears streaming down her face. Her amusement was a hit to my pride. "Of course, Stanley," she managed through her smile, "I want you to meet my grandmother. She's a bit older than you. It's part of my hopeful plan to bring joy to the two most significant people in my life. And just as you feel about me, I feel about you, which is why I'm eager for you and my grandmother to connect. It would mean you becoming an official part of my family, and you already have a special place in my heart." Her words did much to mend my pride. I explained that despite past attractions, I wasn't quite ready to dive into another relationship just yet, but promised to keep her informed when I felt prepared to date again. "Stanley," she said with a hopeful look, "we'll still enjoy our outings together in the meantime, right?" Her smile brought back a sense of familiarity, though I couldn't pinpoint why. I simply nodded and returned the smile. In the weeks that followed, Dahlia often mentioned her grandmother, but I kept my distance, picturing the stereotype of a jolly, elderly woman, kind-hearted but far from what I was seeking. Considering Dahlia's age, I guessed her grandmother to be in her 60s or 70s. Despite any misconception, the thought of pursuing anything romantic just didn't sit right with me. I needed to find a tactful way to convey my feelings to Dahlia. In the meantime, I'd been visiting the park every day, hoping to catch another glimpse of the woman who had captivated me so completely. Yet, day after day, she remained elusive, and my disappointment was slowly morphing into a deeper sense of gloom. Eventually, Dahlia managed to persuade me to meet her grandmother, suggesting it as a kind of mild social outing. I envisioned a simple dinner where afterwards, one of us, perhaps even the grandmother herself, could gently imply that while we found each other's company pleasant, there was no real spark. I agreed, primarily because Dahlia had framed this dinner as her top birthday wish. So, I made reservations at a fine dining establishment and prepared myself. Interestingly, I found myself slightly somber that day, as it would have been the anniversary of my marriage to Linda. The silver lining: no need for anniversary gifts this year. It had been 9 months since our divorce, and nearly a year since I discovered her indiscretion near our neighborhood. Those memories rarely crossed my mind anymore, whether from conscious avoidance or simply because life seemed fuller now. Driving Dahlia to the restaurant in my Mustang, I felt a mix of anticipation and resolve. Dahlia's grandmother was someone important to her, and by extension, to me. I wanted to make a good impression, hoping that would strengthen my bond with Dahlia. We had barely settled in and ordered appetizers when Dahlia mentioned her grandmother was running late. According to Dahlia, her grandmother's age hadn't dulled her wit, though it seemed to have bestowed upon her a leisurely approach to life. Today, she'd been engrossed in gardening and lost track of time. I was bracing myself to meet a frail, forgetful elderly lady, but I was determined to make this evening memorable for Dahlia. Just then, as I scanned the room for the waiter, I spotted her, the woman from the park. Her sudden appearance at such a critical moment was disconcerting. What would Dahlia think if I got distracted? The woman moved across the restaurant, thankfully away from our table, offering me a temporary reprieve from my turmoil. However, curiosity got the better of me. I needed to know if she was with someone. Making an excuse, I ventured to the other side of the restaurant under the guise of searching for the restroom, even though it was clearly located on our side. I scanned the room meticulously but couldn't find her. My eyes darted from one table to the next, but she was nowhere to be seen. Feeling a bit awkward from my fruitless search, I decided to head back to my own table. My heart skipped a beat when I arrived. The woman from the park had taken my spot, engaged in a conversation with Dahlia. Excuse me, I interrupted, a bit flustered. That's actually my seat. When she looked up at me, I was caught off guard again. Her eyes were an extraordinary mix of blue hues, captivating me so much that I nearly missed her response. Her smile was infectious. The next thing I knew, Dahlia was clicking her fingers to snap me out of my trance. Is there an issue here? She prodded, a hint of annoyance in her voice. It's just a seat, after all. Both Granny and I gave her puzzled looks. What's happening? I inquired, genuinely confused. Dahlia's impatience grew. Really, what's the fuss about? She asked, her tone softened by Granny's gentle chide on her choice of words. Apologies, Dahlia conceded. But you both were giving off such odd vibes, and I really wanted tonight to be special. It's my birthday, after all. Stanley, you just told my grandmother she took your seat. She jokingly said move your feet, lose your seat, and then you two just froze, staring at each other. I should have known this wouldn't go smoothly. Have you bumped into any trees recently? Granny teased with a grin. Only if they're as captivating as you, I retorted, trying to match her wit. Look at you, all suave, Granny chuckled, clearly entertained. Dahlia's confusion was palpable. I took a seat next to her, conceding my chair to her grandmother. That's better, Granny approved, turning her attention to me. Now I can properly see the man my granddaughter can't stop talking about. You've clearly made quite the impression, she observed, with a twinkle in her eye. Dahlia, it's not what you think, Dahlia protested, slightly embarrassed by her grandmother's blunt commentary. Then what's the feeling like? Granny asked with a knowing smile. There was something unmistakably unique about her. She had this talent for conveying her emotions in a way that the intended recipient would grasp completely. Her smile was rich with meaning, and it felt like it was meant just for me. What's got you two grinning? Dahlia chimed in, visibly puzzled. Dahlia, dear, I started, remember the lady I mentioned from the park? The one you couldn't stop thinking about after just one glance. Dahlia retorted. I was hoping you'd moved past that. Not at all, I confessed. I've been back to the park every day since, hoping to catch another glimpse of her. Oh no, Dahlia exclaimed. Stanley, why didn't you say it was that deep? I had no idea she left such an impression on you. I wouldn't have planned this if I had. She left a mark on him, but not as memorable as the one he left on that tree, Granny added with a chuckle. I just looked at her, mesmerized by her laughter and the twinkle in her eyes. She would have returned to the park daily too if she lived here. She was only in town to handle some errands and check on her favorite granddaughter. But she discovered she had no need to worry because someone else was looking after her granddaughter well, securing her a new job and lifting her spirits when needed. Are we even talking about the same thing? Dahlia interjected. Dahlia, your grandmother was the lady from the park, I revealed. Dahlia's eyes darted between us, trying to keep up with the conversation like following a tennis match. So, you two, she started, have taken a liking to each other. Her grandmother completed, still smiling warmly at me. Indeed, I added. The rest of the evening felt enchanted. Margaret, Dahlia's grandmother, and I spent it getting to know each other, discussing everything under the sun while Dahlia observed us with a smile. Margaret's youthful appearance puzzled me. I couldn't believe she was a grandmother. Linda, at 49, is 5 years younger than me, making Margaret seem even younger. However, Margaret, at 56, is actually 2 years my senior. She shared her life story with me, revealing she was married young and had Dahlia's mother at 20. Dahlia's mother had been quite the free spirit, eventually leaving Dahlia to be raised by her grandparents. Tragically, 6 years ago, Dahlia's grandfather passed away in an accident, leaving Margaret on her own. Since then, she hadn't considered dating or looking for companionship, content in her solitude. But, influenced by Dahlia's stories about me, Margaret decided to meet me for Dahlia's birthday. Dahlia and I were deep in conversation, sharing the tale of my divorce and the journey that led to it. As the evening stretched on, the staff gently hinted that the restaurant was about to close. Margaret and I found ourselves drawn together, our hands entwined across the table, while Dahlia watched us with a wide, cheerful grin. I'm bummed we didn't get to dance, I lamented. There's always time for that, Margaret reassured me, a playful twinkle in her eye. That is, if you don't mind being seen with someone like me. I'd consider it my greatest joy to be seen with you and you alone, forever, I confessed, earning one of Margaret's heartwarming smiles. Hey, what about me? Dahlia chimed in, feigning jealousy. In the weeks that followed, Margaret's visits from Tennessee to Arizona became so frequent she eventually moved in with Dahlia. But soon, it was clear she was spending most of her time with me, leading to her moving in. The joy I felt waking up next to Margaret each day was unparalleled. I was walking on air, brimming with a happiness I thought impossible. Of course, life had its own plans. Just as Margaret and I were settling into our new home at the edge of the desert, enjoying the bliss of our small oasis with its pool and a deck perfect for watching the sunrise and sunset, reality threw us a curveball. One day, while shopping at our local Kroger for a barbecue, with me picking out a variety of meats and Margaret choosing salmon and fruits for a salad, we were content. Dahlia was on her way to introduce us to yet another potential partner. She seemed hopeful this time, perhaps inspired by our own happiness to find someone special for herself. Dahlia had been quite excited about this new person in her life, suggesting he might be the one. It was a reminder of how unpredictable life can be, but also of the beauty in seeking out happiness wherever we can find it. A few hours had passed, and we were already enjoying the warmth of the grill when Dahlia's cheerful voice echoed as a car parked beside my Mustang GT and Margaret's convertible. Dahlia hurried back to the deck, embracing me with her energetic enthusiasm, much to her grandmother's entertained gaze. "Sorry, Granny, I just miss him sometimes," she quickly apologized. "Oh," Dahlia began. "Stanley, Granny, this is Carl Thomas," I introduced. Hello, Mr. Laurel," Carl greeted. "Your home is lovely, and, well, I think I'm quite fond of your daughter." His voice trailed off nervously. "You two know each other already?" Dahlia inquired. "Indeed," I replied. "I've seen him grow up. His older brother is married to my daughter Amber." "Oh no," Dahlia gasped. "Dahlia, watch the language," Margaret chided gently. "Let's focus on having a good time and enjoying the meal, regardless of past connections." We all nodded in agreement. As the evening unfolded, we relaxed, admiring the breathtaking colors of the sky over the desert as night fell. "Mr. Laurel, what happened?" Carl ventured to ask. "Growing up, you were always the cool dad. And now, years later, you still are. But my brother and Amber never mention you. Amber becomes visibly upset at your name, while my brother seems indifferent, yet he never speaks up, likely to avoid conflict." I sighed deeply, reflecting on the distance that had grown between us. Whenever the past is brought up, Amber is quick to criticize based on her perspective, and it's become a topic we avoid. I've grown apart from them, feeling like my presence only complicates things, especially with Amber's current situation. The evening's pleasant mood had shifted. "Carl," I continued, "I genuinely hope things go well between you and Dahlia. She's a kind soul, unlike Amber, who seems to have taken after her mother's less admirable traits. It might be best for your brother to distance himself from that negativity. I'm sorry, dear," I added, turning to Margaret, who came over to offer her support. "Amber's behavior is concerning," I concluded. "If unchecked, she might follow in her mother's footsteps, leading to a cycle of control and resentment that could erode your brother's self-worth. It's a situation that no one should have to endure, marked by constant struggle and conflict. Do you think I look happy now? You bet I am. I'm in a much better place than if I'd stayed entangled with Linda. Don't get me wrong, my love for my daughter is unwavering, and I miss her terribly, but she chose her path. Despite my efforts to stay in touch, she sided with her mother and shut me out. Linda, it seems, has kept the real reason for our split under wraps, twisting the narrative to alienate me from our daughter." "Carl," I found myself saying, "do you want to help your brother avoid the turmoil I went through?" "Absolutely," he responded. "Great, how about we invite Danny and Amber over for a barbecue next weekend? It's high time the truth came out. Just don't let on it's at my place. Say it's to meet your partner's family." The following week, Margaret and I braced ourselves for what we knew would be a tense affair. We had deep discussions about the potential fallout and what it could mean for us. But deep down, we both knew it wouldn't affect us personally. Regardless of the outcome, having Margaret in my life filled me with joy. So much so, that I impulsively took her to town and we got married that Wednesday. It was a simple ceremony, just us and Dahlia, reaffirming what we already knew: we were committed to each other. Margaret's fierce love was evident, as always. The barbecue wasn't just about saving Danny from a similar fate, it was also a cautionary tale for Carl and Dahlia. More so, it was a chance to clear the air with Amber, hoping to reconnect with her and, by extension, be a part of my future grandchild's life. It was a win-win situation for me. No matter the evening's outcome, I had Margaret and Dahlia by my side. On the barbecue morning, Carl called in a panic. Everything was on track, but Amber had thrown us a curveball by insisting on bringing Linda. Amber wouldn't come without her, possibly deterring Danny as well. I reassured Carl, telling him to bring Linda along. It was about time we addressed everything. We had carefully planned that Margaret and I would not be present when the guests arrived. Carl was at home with Dahlia to welcome everyone. It was the first time Amber and Dahlia would meet, and Danny was also new to Dahlia. Linda had met Dahlia before, but we were hoping she wouldn't make the connection between Dahlia and me. The plan unfolded smoothly. Carl and Dahlia managed to make everyone feel at home. As they all relaxed on the deck, Margaret arrived and went to greet them, explaining my tardiness by mentioning a quick run to the store for drinks and snacks. Danny complimented Margaret on her car, and she suggested he'd find my car even more impressive. Amber chimed in with a remark about practicality over style. Linda, who had been quiet, inquired about Margaret's bracelet. That's when I arrived, unnoticed as I approached. Linda mentioned she once had a similar bracelet, to which Amber responded sharply, correcting her mother's memory based on a friend's mistaken comment about a gift from their father. Linda insisted firmly, revealing her belief in the gift's existence based on a left-behind receipt, attributing his actions to his struggles. Amber dismissed her father's departure as selfish, but Margaret interjected, prompting Amber to reconsider her father's character and questioning Margaret's knowledge on the matter. Margaret revealed the bracelet indeed belonged to Linda, sharing an inscription that reflected deep sentiments from Stan, leading to an emotional moment for Linda, highlighting her ongoing battle with depression and the impact of the revelation. "How did you end up with this?" Amber questioned sharply. "It was my doing," I admitted. "I planned to erase the engraving and replace it." "I convinced him otherwise," Margaret interjected. "I chose to keep it as a reminder of a mistake that cost me dearly, over something trivial." "It's my bracelet," Linda interjected, barely containing her anger. I demanded back. "Amber, why are you confronting me after everything?" I asked. "Considering the circumstances of our departure, I wouldn't expect to be welcomed." "Amber, I never abandoned you or anyone else," I explained. "Throughout and after the divorce, I made efforts to stay in touch, but your conversations always circled back to your mother's ordeal. Eventually, I expressed a desire to avoid that topic, and you suggested if we couldn't discuss it, perhaps we should cease communication. Even then, I continued reaching out, but to no avail." "Dad, Mom was deeply affected," Amber responded, tears streaming down her face. "You vanished without explanation, leaving her destitute and homeless. She was devoted to you." Emotionally moved, she embraced me, seeking comfort. "You still made a mistake, Dad," she whispered after a moment. "Let's all have a discussion," I suggested. "Carl, take care of the steaks. Dahlia, dear, would you mind preparing some fruit and drinks? It's time for a heart-to-heart." "And what about Mom?" Amber inquired. "Perhaps she would benefit from some rest in the hammock," I proposed. Amber went to assist her mother, who seemed distant and disoriented, fixated on the bracelet. Gathered around the dinner table, holding Margaret's hand, I began to explain. "Amber, your mother and I shared many wonderful years and genuine affection. However, as time passed, she began to lose focus on our core values. Initially, our priority was our unity, which then shifted to your well-being. Unfortunately, other distractions eventually emerged. Disagreements are natural in any relationship, and handling them effectively can strengthen a bond. Yet, over the years, your mother's behavior grew increasingly domineering." I paused, looking directly at Amber, hoping to bridge the gap between our perspectives. Towards the end, our marriage felt more like a constant tug-of-war than a bond of love. The final disagreement went on for what seemed like an eternity. After I retired early, the thrill of bickering across different time zones had worn off. Your mom had reached a point where she didn't just ask me to do things, she demanded them. Whenever I pushed back, the outcome was predictably the same, a cold shoulder. That became her go-to method of persuasion. Amber gave me a curious look. "That was some advice she passed on to me too," she remarked. She glanced at Danny. "Seems effective." Danny just stared at the ground. "No, Amber," I countered. "It's not effective. Every action has consequences, some unseen for years." For me, it escalated to the point where I couldn't stand being manipulated and stood my ground. The final straw was laughably trivial. She demanded I take out the trash. I refused. She resorted to her usual tactic, hinting at a chilly atmosphere if I didn't comply. I was unfazed. Amber's expression was one of bewilderment. "Indeed, it didn't work," I continued. So, weeks went by without intimacy. We stopped speaking for days, and even when we did start talking again, the impasse lingered. I had been pushed beyond my limit. Being intimate with your mom was something I cherished, despite all the changes, but not at the expense of my dignity. Your mom was fortunate, I added. Many would have sought comfort elsewhere, using her indifference as an excuse. But not me. Amber, Margaret, and I only met after your mother and I had officially parted ways. But the possibility was there. Eventually, your mother began to soften her approach towards me. It was disheartening, bickering over trivial matters when we were supposed to be in love. It made me reconsider the depth of my feelings for her, overshadowing any petty disagreement. So, I planned an elaborate Valentine's Day to move past our issues and reconnect. I bought a bracelet, flowers, and all sorts of things. Linda, coming into a moment of clarity, approached. "Did you fall back in love with me then?" she inquired. I nodded, even when I wasn't at my best. Another nod from me. "What led to our separation, Stanley?" She probed further. "Linda, it was the day you went out to take the trash out, the day before Valentine's. Time to head out, Amber, she said, her voice laced with impatience. I've heard enough. Why, Mom? Amber questioned. She's trying to shield you from the truth of our divorce, I chimed in. He's spinning tales, Linda quickly countered. Let's go, Amber. Enough of this. Tell me, Dad, Amber urged. I trailed your mom one day. She headed to a neglected spot behind our building, a place I thought was just for tossing trash. But there, she met with the maintenance man. It was evident their meeting was not their first. That moment shattered everything for me. She had been avoiding any closeness with me, her husband, under the guise of love, while secretly engaging with someone else. He's lying, sweetheart, Linda insisted. You know I wouldn't do that. I calmly placed my phone on the table and played a video that left no room for doubt about Linda's actions. Linda reached for the phone in a panic. Imagine, Amber, if Danny betrayed you, could you overlook it? I asked, trying to make her see the depth of the betrayal. Caught in her thoughts, Amber didn't respond. Our attention briefly shifted as our dinner arrived, a small respite from the tension. Dad, why didn't you? Amber started, but couldn't finish. What choice did I have? I pondered aloud. The pain was overwhelming. Perhaps I could have been more graceful, but I needed to salvage my pride. And unfortunately, that meant consequences for your mother and Dino. So Mom was left alone and struggling, Amber shared. She's been through a lot, battling mood swings and losing touch with reality at times. And I spent all this time blaming you, but it wasn't really your fault, was it? It was actually guilt, I admitted. Now that she understands the real reason behind our split, perhaps she can begin to heal. But Dad, why didn't you confront her then? Amber pressed. Why not face them directly and express your anger? I'm not sure, I confessed. Initially, I was too stunned to react. I couldn't fathom why it happened, and my self-esteem took a hit. Imagine that. I thought I was in good shape, decent looking, but Mom, the woman I married and loved, chose someone else over me. It made me question my worth. What would have been the point? She might have just argued that it was her choice. I would never have said that, Linda interjected. Stanley, my love for you was as deep as yours was for me. You just don't understand what I was going through. When we first met, I felt beautiful. But as years passed, societal norms shifted. It used to be common for a woman to stay home, but that's changed. Most of my friends, even those who are married, work. And those who had children often returned to work once their kids were grown. You, Stanley, had your career and your accomplishments. Your inventions were so valued that your company paid you handsomely to acquire them. Amber had her own social life, her friends, and activities. I felt like I had nothing outside of our family and home. True, I didn't maintain myself as I used to. When we met, I was naturally fit and didn't need to exercise. I saw you working out and thought it unnecessary for me. I believed I had control within our home. Even after Amber and my figure changed, I managed to influence you easily. But why bother with the effort when I could achieve what I wanted without it? Later, I convinced myself that aging and changes in my appearance were natural. But Stanley, you remained devoted. If I mentioned a car or a vacation, I knew you'd make it happen, not because I manipulated you, but because you loved me. And our intimacy was a part of that love, not a currency. Up until a short while ago, when I overheard your conversation with Amber about how you could have easily sought companionship elsewhere, I hadn't fully grasped the depth of your patience with me. It dawned on me then how deeply you must have cared to tolerate my many flaws. And Stanley, flawed I was. Perhaps in a twisted way, I recognize my mistakes now, but back then, it felt like all I had. In the beginning of our relationship, being intimate with you was something I cherished. As time passed, that feeling only grew, yet somehow, in the recent years, I lost sight of its importance. It transformed into a means to an end, rather than a gesture of my love for you. And Stanley, please never question my love for you. Together, we brought a beautiful daughter into this world. I adore her, but my love for you has always been steadfast. There's a saying about if your only tool is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. In my case, intimacy was the only tool I thought I had. So, when you mentioned that intimacy with me was no longer something you needed, it crushed me. It made me feel utterly worthless. Reflect on it, Stanley. Over the years, you kept yourself in great shape, unlike many others our age, while I allowed time to take its toll on me. You were the only one who desired me, which led me to mistakenly believe it wasn't your love for me, but rather the physical aspect of our relationship. It took me too long to realize that what I thought was unique about me was not so unique after all. And when you seemed indifferent, I was heartbroken. Then Dino appeared, always the charmer. The night I struggled with the trash and he helped, his touch was unexpected. Initially, I brushed it off, attributing it to an accident. But his presence became a constant, and his actions more deliberate. It was shocking, yet a part of me felt validated by his attention, misguided as it was. You seemed distant, and here was someone showing interest. It gave me a false sense of control, a balance to the scale, though it was nothing more than an illusion. In the weeks that followed, Dino's behavior escalated, and I found myself caught in a situation I never envisioned. Initially, there was guilt, but a part of me craved the feeling of being desired, something I felt I had lost from you. Dino had a way of making me feel cornered, like I was under his thumb without any way out. Whenever I showed hesitation, he'd vanish for days, leaving me in a lurch. It's the oldest story in the book, and believe me, it wasn't about intimacy. I found no joy in it. You've seen it yourself on your phone how he was too forceful. Yet, if I didn't pretend to be into it or showed any dislike, he'd threaten to find someone else who was, or he'd just disappear for a while. By the time he'd reappear, I was so starved for affection that I'd agree to anything just to feel wanted. I learned to fake enjoyment and to say things that would boost his ego. I felt I had no choice, because without him, I felt like I had nothing. Why do you think I started warming up to you again? She asked. Even though I lost the argument, I conceded. Remember when I suggested we could be close whenever you wanted? But Stanley, after that, you never did. I understand now it was because you'd seen me with him and were so turned off that you were already planning to leave. Then, I got wind of the bracelet and the special evening you had planned for us. It could have been a fresh start, Stanley. I really wanted that. That's why I tried to reconnect with you physically. All you had to do was show me you still wanted me. My love for you never wavered, it just all spiraled out of control. Mom, why did you make me think this was all Dad's fault? Amber yelled. And all the advice you've given me, it's just more manipulation, isn't it? Control has no place in love, I said. The real way to control is by loving someone so deeply they'd never think of leaving. Like Margaret and me. And what about Dino? Linda inquired. Stanley, you're the reason he was let go, right? I merely nodded and smiled, staying silent. But yes, Dino's downfall was more than just losing his job. He was left limping and, without going into details, he was significantly humbled. His departure from this world came after, unrelated to me, due to his poor health. Let's focus on moving forward, I suggested. We can't change the past, nor am I sure we'd want to. I may have missed out with my daughter, but I've built a relationship with my granddaughter, Dahlia. I'd love to reconnect with Amber and Danny, but Amber, you need to reflect on your own life. I don't want your marriage to mirror your mother's and mine. That's why we're here, to prevent history from repeating itself. It's time to let go and move on. Looking back, I see now that perhaps I played a role in how things unfolded. Maybe I should have encouraged her to pursue her own interests, making her less reliant on me. That could have made control less of an issue. I'll admit, looking back, I wasn't exactly a saint either. Stubbornness was a trait we both seemed to excel in, Linda. I got to a point where I was set in my ways, unwilling to change. Perhaps, if we'd both been more open to compromise, things might have turned out differently. And maybe, just maybe, part of the blame lies with me for being too laid back. Perhaps the whole mess started over something as trivial as my reluctance to do household chores, like taking out the trash. So, Linda, I'm genuinely sorry for the role I played in our fallout. I also regret the way I left things between us. It wasn't the right way to handle the situation, but that doesn't excuse your actions either. Truthfully, I'm still grappling with the disrespect you showed, and I'm not ready to forgive yet. Linda, I really wish you could see, you began. My actions weren't meant to hurt you. It was me trying to find who I am beyond us. Right now, I'm dealing with a lot, taking several medications to manage my mood. Even my therapist is puzzled about whether our marriage then caused my mental issues or if those issues were the reason our marriage ended. But one thing I'm sure of is my regret. Not a single day goes by that I don't wish things were different between us. The room fell into a heavy silence, everyone waiting for my response. Thankfully, Margaret lightened the mood, insisting she was glad things ended as they did, which got a laugh out of everyone. Then Amber, our daughter, brought up my past issues with alcohol and gambling. No comment was all I could muster. I wasn't about to start compensating Linda for her infidelity, regardless of her reasons. I've supported her and our lifestyle for over 30 years without her needing to work. I see no reason to pay for the damage done to our marriage and the ripple effects on others. Maybe I'm still being stubborn, but that's how I see it. So, I avoided answering Amber's question directly to avoid lying. They might try to challenge the divorce settlement in court, but I'd find a way to protect my assets. Margaret then joked about my ongoing aversion to taking out the trash, which even Linda found funny. All right, everyone, let's eat, I announced, ready to move on from the conversation. Over the next few hours, we enjoyed each other, sharing food, drinks, and laughter. We made a pact to meet more often, aiming to knit ourselves into a cohesive family unit. I was genuinely happy to reconnect with Amber and held a sliver of hope for her transformation. The conversations we had brought much-needed closure to our shared past. As for my future, my heart belongs to Margaret, unwaveringly so. Dahlia has become like a daughter to me, our bond surpassing even the connection I have with Amber, despite the lack of biological ties. Dahlia and Carl eventually tied the knot, and in a touching gesture, named their firstborn Stanley, after me, and their daughter Stana. Linda and I could never mend our relationship. The wounds, deepened by jealousy and attempts to dominate, were too profound. Yet, in an unexpected turn, Linda and Margaret found a way to coexist, if not quite become friends. It all began that night, possibly sparked by Linda herself. As the evening wound down, Linda approached Margaret to express her gratitude for the hospitality, a move that surprised us all. Margaret, ever gracious, removed her bracelet and presented it to Linda, saying, "Keep it." It seems it was always meant for you. But remember, the real value is in the love of the person who gave it, and I have that in abundance. And you always will, I assured her. As we watched their car disappear into the evening glow, I wrapped my arms around Margaret, feeling a profound sense of relief and readiness to move forward. I'm relieved we can finally leave the past behind and focus on our future, I shared. Margaret playfully noted the absence of the bracelet, hinting at a new one for herself. I teased her about the cost, considering the rising prices of gold and diamonds, but her smile told me it was a challenge she expected me to accept. Let's visit the jewelry store tomorrow, I suggested, ready to make another gesture of my love. Margaret, with a twinkle in her eye, hinted at wanting to spend the evening close together, cherishing our connection. There's this spot here. It really misses you. It's been like hours. Can I have you, or do you need me to roll around in the trash with you? My comment: did you like the ending? Do you think OP is making the correct choice here? Sub and like if you enjoyed this, and I will try to upload one more in the afternoon.